So a kind of very much basic view of climate change, very simplistic view of this is we emit about 41 gigatons a year. That's 41 billion tons. To get to stabilization of 2 degrees centigrade, we need to reduce emissions by between 15 and 18 billion tons, ideally by 2030, but certainly with a trajectory towards that.
So you mean CO2 equivalent?
CO2 equivalent, yeah. Gigatons of CO2 equivalent. So that should stabilize temperatures at 2 degrees centigrade, and that's 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Why is that important? Well, the climate modelers tell us that once you go beyond 2 degrees of temperature growth, you get effects that can be runaway, positive feedback effects. It's what's called the dangerous climate change threshold. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve. We spend a lot of our time thinking about how we solve that with new technologies, with fuels, with digitization of the workforce. But one of the things that's often forgotten about greenhouse gas emissions globally is 20% of global emissions come from deforestation and land degradation. So that's 5 times the size of the global cement sector. It's 10 times the size of the aviation sector. So land use change, degradation, deforestation results in emissions of carbon dioxide and methane up into the atmosphere. And I think we tend to forget that because we tend to focus on tailpipe emissions and nasty cement plants and the oil and gas sector, but no single sector collectively has that big an impact. And that's why when we think about nature-based solutions, we think about how we reverse some of those effects. If you look at the total emissions that have happened since the Industrial Revolution, it's 375 billion tons of emissions of CO2. But alongside that, land use change has been 180 billion tons of emissions since the beginning of the industrial era. And again, we don't tend to think about nature, we don't think about forests as being at the scale of emissions of all of the other industrial facilities. But what's most interesting and most important from research that's been widely peer-reviewed and published as part of the IPCC's reports is when we think about reversing climate change, the areas where we can reduce emissions the fastest, ending tropical deforestation, doing large-scale land restoration could reduce global emissions by 25 to 40% if we had a concerted mobilization of capital to support it. And again, sometimes this gets lost in the messaging. Sometimes people think my view is we should continue emitting and not reduce our emissions with technology or alternative fuels. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is 25 to 40% of those reductions could come from a very focused effort on land restoration, on preventing deforestation, on reversing degradation of some of the project sites like mangroves that we look at.